back to the UK because I can't buy proper chocolate. And Craig said, well, that's crazy. We Brits, we eat more chocolate than anybody. We really know our chocolate. And she said, well, we do eat a lot of chocolate, but we don't eat real chocolate. We eat low cocoa chocolate, and I'm talking about the real stuff that has higher cocoa in. She said, what I'd really love to do, Craig, is to launch my own chocolate brand, but I don't want to give up my day job. I'll do it sort of evenings and weekends. And given you're already in the business of supplying natural foods, perhaps you could distribute it off the back of your other business. And Craig, who's all for all things entrepreneurial, said, well, there's a big catch with this. He said, I am Mr. Health Food. How can I possibly be seen to be distributing a chocolate brand? I've been banging on about no added sugar and organic and all of these things for a lifetime. It will blow my credibility if I were to do this. And Joe said, well, the problem with you, Craig, although I love you and you're my husband, but the real problem with you is you're so extreme that you think the population thinks as you do, and you're just so far out there in your views. And actually what most people want is really delicious chocolate. And actually if we could make that using organic ingredients, not spraying the cocoa with chemicals, we wouldn't want to do a diet chocolate. We'd want it to be very indulgent. But if it was really clean ingredients and it was manufactured in a responsible way and a sustainable way, what's wrong with that? Because actually that's what most people want, taste first and then the reassurance of organic. So to cut a long story short, they agreed to do it. This was the first pack design. I love this pack design because they had such confidence in the integrity of the product. They put the ingredients on the front rather than the back, which is always a sort of very honest claim. From day one, the Soil Association, which is the organic certification body, have always independently monitored the brand. And then a few years later, the second product from Green & Black's arrived, Green & Black's Maya Gold. This is the world's first fair trade product, not just chocolate, but any product. And in 1994, it hit the shelves. And it was a function of a holiday that Craig and Joe had, whereas most of us would enjoy going and sitting by the pool on our summer holiday. They decided to go on a rainforest tour to Belize back in 1993, I think it was when they had this tour. And as you do when you're on holiday, they bumped into a group of cacao growers and got into conversation. And they found that actually these cacao growers had been growing their cocoa organically, very, very small quantities. And they heard about how a few years prior to this, a big American chocolate corporation had promised the growers that if they grew their cocoa this way, they would pay them a premium for their premium per ton for their cocoa. And what had happened in the intermediate period is the market commodity price of cocoa had crashed. And then when it was time to harvest the crop, the American corporation said, well, actually, we did say we could pay you that, but life's moved on a bit. We can't actually pay you what we thought we could. So the growers were left in a very difficult position. And this was really small quantity, to put it in context. It would not have hurt the big corporation to have honoured their original commitment. So Craig, being all things entrepreneurial, said, well, don't worry about that. We've just started this little chocolate company back in the UK. What about if we bought the cocoa off you? How much did they say they'd pay you? And so they told him that. And he said, well, no problem. I'll pay you what they said they would pay you, provided you can find a way of getting the chocolates back over to the UK. So that happened. And then when it arrived in London, call came through, or not from London, but it arrived in the UK to say, Mr. Sam's, there's this container load of cocoa. What would you like us to do with it? And he thought it would never arrive, but it did turn up. And what they did is create a tribute bar, really, which was a dark chocolate with orange and spices that was based upon an ancient recipe for a chocolate drink that was drunk by the Mayan Indian population of Belize. So Maya Gold was born. At the same time, there was a new organization trying to get its act together called the Fair Trade Foundation. And the Fair Trade Foundation said, actually, this Maya Gold project is exactly what fair trade is about, dealing direct with the growers. Could we launch fair trade on this product and launch at the same time? So in 1994, in the March of that year, Maya Gold was launched. The first customer to stock Maya Gold was Oxfam, who are a supporter of the ethical trade movement. And I think that was a key moment in Green & Black's life when all of a sudden we had newspapers writing about this trailblazing sort of ethical brand that had hit the scene in a small way, but with huge integrity. And integrity and honesty is very important when you have a brand like this. So Green & Black's is finding its feet in the UK. The people who are stocking the brand at this stage mirror the green and mirror the blacks of the brand name. So we have on the green side, Green & Black's available in stores like Holland & Barrett and local organic health food shops. And we all know sort of probably shops in our neighbourhood like that. And then on the black side of the brand, if you like, the sort of really foodie designer end of the brand, Green & Black's was sold in Selfridges, Harvey Nichols and Harrods Food Hall. So the really finest places were stocking Green & Black's, and Fortnum & Mason. So it was a really unusual start to life. You know, we're in the extreme green and the extreme black. And I always say to people, say to me on Greener Blacks, are you an organic brand or are you a premium brand? And the answer is we're both, and we sort of refuse to choose. And right from the brand's early origins, it's always been able to operate in the green side and the black side of its business. Of course, back at this time, if you ask people in the UK where they would buy chocolate, they would say, well, I buy chocolate from my local petrol station, corner store, or supermarket, and Greener Blacks was not available in any of those places. And then we moved to, we're now in the mid to late 90s, and I remember this time not so fondly because one major event happened, and as was mentioned in the introduction, I used to run the marketing for Burger King in the UK, and something called mad cow disease happened. And I remember being in my car on the way to work and getting a phone call saying, today is going to be the mother of all days, because it's going to break in the press about mad cow disease. And when you've got a business that's dependent upon flame-grilled 100% beef Whoppers, it's quite serious when things like that happen. So it was a crisis management mode. We sold a lot of chicken royales for a few weeks rather than beef products. But the interesting thing about that incident for me was that issues around where our food is coming from and the integrity of our food, to be honest, had been quite minority interests. So there were subjects of academics would write about, they'd be in the supplements of Sunday newspapers, but it was never really front page news. And when you have a big scare, all of a sudden the media tune in. And the nation at large started to think about, well, actually, where on earth is my food from? Where has it come from? What's happened to it along the way from origin to what I'm actually putting on my plate and what I am consuming? And when you have national interest like that, front page of Daily Mail, you know, BBC, 10 o'clock news at night as the lead story, retailers tend to react. And Greener Blacks had this incredible sort of lucky break, to be honest, where the telephone would go in the office and it would be someone saying, hello, my name's David, I am the special projects buyer for Sainsbury's, and my job is to put organic food products into our stores. Would you mind supplying us? Which, having been with them last week discussing their latest margin requests or demands, we have a slightly different relationship these days. But back then, it was this wonderful sort of passport and an incubation period, really, to get into the bigger stores. But what, of course, happened is Greener Blacks didn't go into the chocolate section. It went into a specially created area of the stores alongside other ethical and organic products. And it would be fair to say back then that not all of the products on that fixture tasted particularly good. So they were all very well-meaning and worthy and ethical. But there was a real mixed bag in terms of quality. And what happened is Greener Blacks was the star of the show on this fixture. And we became known, certainly amongst the early adopters that were very interested in organic and ethical food, as the star brand in that area. At that point, we were not really competing with other chocolate brands head-to-head. We were sort of finding our own feet and finding our way into the big time. This was about the time that we'd now been selling in the supermarkets for 2 or 3 years. The business had grown to about £1.5 million worth of sales, which was good. But then we had our second kind of major hiccup, which is essentially Greener Blacks nearly went bust. And the reason it went bust is it didn't have a good back office, as I would call it, so good financial control. So the business grew in terms of orders, but it couldn't cope with the growth. So insufficient investment in terms of financial people operating in a company, and to be honest, fairly hopeless infrastructure in terms of being able to take orders electronically, deliver them to customers. And when you start supplying the likes of Tesco and Sainsbury, it's not really good enough to say, well, we might turn up later today with a delivery. You kind of have to meet the slots and operate like a bigger professional player. So at that stage, the business was refinanced, a new team joined, the founders remained involved, but as shareholders rather than operational managers, and hopefully the whole business was professionalized. I arrived together with a couple of colleagues, and we very quickly worked out that we thought Greener Blacks was just an incredible